"They left us here to die," Little Twin said. "What Hell's Angel did next will shock you." The mountain road twisted like a snake that had lost its way. Ray leaned into the curve, his motorcycle growling beneath him. Rain still dripped from the pine trees, though the storm had passed hours ago. The sky above was bruised purple and gold, the last light of day fading fast. He was a big man, broad shoulders, thick arms covered in faded tattoos. His leather jacket was worn soft from years on the road, and on the back, stitched in old thread, was a patch that made most folks step aside. His beard was gray at the edges now, and lines cut deep around his eyes. 45 years old, and every one of them showed on his face. People saw Ray and saw trouble. They always had. At gas stations, mothers pulled their kids a little closer. Waitresses gave him quick, nervous smiles and set down his coffee too fast. He had gotten used to it. Mostly. But nobody ever saw the other things. Nobody saw the man who stopped to help a stranger with a flat tire in the rain. Nobody saw the man who cried alone at night sometimes, remembering the family that never wanted him. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Ray had learned to keep those parts hidden. Deep down, where the judging eyes could not reach. The engine rumbled as he climbed higher into the hills. Somewhere up here was Thomas. Thomas Carter. The one person who had ever looked at Ray and seen something worth trusting. They had met more than 20 years back. Two young men who did not fit anywhere else. Thomas had a gentle way about him. He talked about family and second chances and doing right by people. Then life pulled them apart, the way it does. Years passed, letters stopped coming. But Ray never forgot the promise he made. "If you ever need me, brother, I will come find you." 3 weeks ago, a letter had arrived at Ray's empty apartment. Thomas's handwriting, shaky and rushed. Something about the village, something about trouble coming. And then nothing. No more letters. No answer to Ray's calls. So Ray got on his bike and rode. He passed a wooden sign, half buried in mud from the storm. The paint had peeled away, but he could still read the name of the village carved beneath. A few more miles, that was all. The road grew rougher. Fallen branches littered the path, and once he had to stop and drag a whole tree trunk aside with his bare hands, grunting with the effort. Mud caked his boots. Still he kept going. The sun dipped lower. Then, as he came around one final bend, the village appeared. Ray slowed the bike. His eyes narrowed. The little town sat in a valley, wrapped in the orange glow of sunset. Small houses, a dusty main road, a well in the center square. It should have been peaceful. It should have been full of life. But it was silent. Dead silent. Ray shut off his engine and let the quiet wash over him. No dogs barking. No voices. No smoke rising from any chimney. Just the wind whispering through empty streets. He climbed off the bike, boots crunching on wet gravel, and walked slowly forward. The first thing he saw was a child's tricycle, tipped over in a yard. Beside it, a red ball sat forgotten in a puddle. He looked toward the nearest house. The front door hung open, swaying gently. Ray stepped closer and peered inside. His stomach tightened. There were plates on the table, food still on them, gone rotten now. A chair pushed back like someone had stood up in the middle of a meal. A family photo hung crooked on the wall, showing smiling faces frozen in a happier time. He moved to the next house. Same thing. And the next. Toys on the floor. Clothes still hanging on a line, stiff and soaked. A kettle on a cold stove. This was not a place people had chosen to leave slowly, packing their things, saying goodbye. This was a place people had run from. Fast, all at once, Ray stood in the middle of the empty square, as the last light bled from the sky. A chill crept down his spine. "Thomas," he said quietly, "what happened here?" The wind gave no answer. He looked around at the dark shapes of the houses. Somewhere in this ghost town might be a clue. Something to tell him where his friend had gone. Ray pulled a small flashlight from his jacket and clicked it on. "All right," he murmured to himself. "Looks like I'm staying the night." And he walked toward the first house to begin his search. Morning came gray and cold. Ray woke on a couch in one of the empty houses, his back stiff, his neck sore. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then the silence reminded him. That heavy, waiting silence. He rubbed his face and sat up. The night had given him nothing. He had searched 3 houses by flashlight before his eyes grew too heavy. Now, with the pale light of day slipping through the windows, he could see better. Ray stood and stretched. His stomach growled. He dug a granola bar from his jacket pocket and ate it in 2 bites. Then he got back to work. House by house, he searched. He moved through kitchens and bedrooms, opening drawers and closets. Everywhere he looked, he found the same story. Lives cut short in the middle of ordinary days. A book left open on a nightstand. A child's shoe by the door, its match nowhere in sight. A calendar on the wall, marked with birthdays and doctor visits that no one had come home to. He found no bodies, no signs of a fight. That gave him a small piece of comfort. Whatever had happened, it did not look like violence. But it did not look right either. In one house, Ray found a wallet still full of cash sitting on the counter. Nobody running from a fire or a flood would leave money behind. In another, a woman's purse hung on a hook by the door, car keys resting inside. "You don't leave your keys," Ray muttered. "Not unless somebody made you go quick." He kept searching, hunting for Thomas's name, his handwriting, anything. Around midday, he found something. In a small house near the edge of the square, tucked in a kitchen drawer beneath a stack of napkins, Ray found a scrap of paper. On it, written in a hurried hand, were 3 words. "Do not sell." He turned it over. Nothing on the back, but the words made his chest tighten. Sell what? The houses? The land? He pocketed the note and moved on. The afternoon wore thin. Clouds drifted low over the valley, and the wind picked up, rattling loose shutters. Ray had searched more than a dozen homes now, and he was starting to feel it. That hollow, sinking feeling. Like he had come too late. "Where are you, brother?" he said softly. He was standing in the middle of the square, deciding where to look next when he heard it. At first he thought it was the wind, a thin, high sound, rising and falling. Ray went still. He held his breath and listened. There, again. Not the wind, not an animal. Crying, a child crying. His heart slammed against his ribs. He turned his head, trying to find the direction. The sound was faint, carried strange by the empty streets. He walked toward the far end of the village, past the last row of houses to where an old farmhouse stood alone against a hillside. The crying grew louder. Ray broke into a run. He reached the farmhouse and shoved the door open. It banged against the wall. Dust floated in the gray light. The place smelled of damp wood and something sour. "Hello?" His voice came out rough. "Anybody here?" The crying stopped. Ray froze. Then he heard it, a small, scared whimper, quickly hushed. It was coming from a closet at the end of the hall. He crossed the floor slowly, boots creaking on old boards. He did not want to scare whoever was in there. He crouched low as he reached the closet door. making himself smaller. "It's okay," he said gently, the way you might talk to a frightened animal. "I'm not gonna hurt you. I promise." His big hand closed around the closet's handle. He pulled it open. Inside, huddled in the dark, were 2 children. Twins. A boy and a girl, no more than 4 years old. Their faces were streaked with dust and dried tears. Their clothes were dirty. They looked thin, and their eyes were huge with fear. The little girl pushed herself in front of the boy, shielding him. Her tiny hands trembled. But she looked up at Ray, this giant stranger in leather, and she did not look away. Her lips moved. "They left us here to die," she whispered. Those words hit Ray harder than any punch he had ever taken. For a moment he could not move. He just knelt there, staring at the 2 small faces looking up at him from the dark closet. His throat felt tight. His eyes stung. They left us here to die. He knew that fear. He knew it deep in his bones. A long time ago he had been a scared kid, too, waiting for grown-ups who never came back. Ray swallowed hard and made his voice soft. "No," he said. "No, sweetheart. Nobody's leaving you. Not anymore." The little girl did not move. She kept her arm out in front of her brother, still trying to protect him. Her chin shook, but she held her ground. Ray held out his hand slowly. It was a huge hand, rough and scarred, but he kept it open and gentle. "My name's Ray," he said. "I came looking for a friend, but I think maybe I was really supposed to find you." The little boy peeked out from behind his sister. His eyes were red from crying. "Are you a monster?" the boy whispered. Ray felt something crack inside his chest. He almost laughed, but it came out more like a broken breath. "Some folks think so," he said honestly. "But no, I'm just a guy who's gonna take care of you. That's all." The girl studied his face for a long time. Kids could tell things grown-ups couldn't. They saw straight through you. Ray held still and let her look. Finally, her little shoulders dropped. Just a little. "I'm Mia," she said. "This is Noah. He's my brother." "Mia and Noah," Ray repeated softly. "Good names. Strong names." He shifted so he was sitting on the floor, making himself even smaller. "How long you 2 been in here?" Mia's lip trembled. "The storm came. Everybody left. They said they'd come back." Her voice broke. "They never came back." "We ate the crackers," Noah added quietly. "And the bread. But it's all gone now." Ray looked at their thin arms and hollow cheeks, and his heart twisted. Days. These babies had been alone for days, surviving on scraps and rainwater and each other. "You drank rainwater?" he asked. Mia nodded. "From the bucket. By the window." She said it like it was normal, like a 4-year-old should know how to keep herself alive. Ray had to look away for a second so they wouldn't see his eyes fill up. "You did good," he said, his voice rough. "You hear me? Both of you. You were so brave. Braver than most grown men I know." Noah's mouth wobbled into something almost like a smile. Ray leaned closer. "Now listen to me. I'm gonna get you out of this closet. I'm gonna get you warm, and I'm gonna find you some food. And I promise you, on everything I've got, nobody is leaving you alone again. Not while I'm breathing." Mia looked at him. Her eyes searched his face one more time. Then she reached out and put her tiny hand in his. Ray gently lifted them both. They weighed almost nothing. Mia clung to his neck. Noah held onto his shirt with both fists. Ray carried them out of the dark and into the fading gray light. He found a room with a couch and a fireplace. He got a small fire going with dry wood and old newspaper. He dug through his pack and found more granola bars, a can of beans, and a bottle of water. He fed them slow, so their empty stomachs wouldn't hurt. He watched them chew, watched the color come back to their cheeks. When night fell, the cold crept in. Ray took off his leather jacket. It was old and worn and smelled of the road, but it was warm. He laid it over the two of them like a blanket as they curled up together on the couch. "That's your coat," Mia mumbled sleepily. "I run hot," Ray lied. He sat on the floor beside them, his back against the couch. He watched the fire. He watched the door. He listened to the wind outside and the soft breathing of the children behind him. He did not sleep. He would not sleep. Not while they needed guarding. Somewhere out in the dark, answers were waiting. Somewhere his friend Thomas was still missing. But right now, none of that mattered. What mattered was staying. Ray pulled his knees up and settled in for the long night. And in his heart, quiet and certain, he made his choice. He was not going anywhere. Not until these two were safe. Morning came slow and gray. The storm had passed, but it left the world soaked and quiet. Ray woke the twins gently. He gave them the last of the water and half a granola bar each. Then he stood and stretched his stiff back. "All right," he said. "We got work to do. We need food. We need supplies. You two stay close to me, okay?" Mia and Noah nodded. They stayed close, all right. So close they nearly tripped him with every step. Ray did not mind, not one bit. They went house to house. The village was strange and still. Doors hung open. Toys sat in yards, soaked and forgotten. It gave Ray a cold feeling, like walking through a place where time had stopped. But he pushed that feeling down. The kids needed him steady. In the first house, he found canned soup and a bag of rice in a cupboard. He held them up like treasure. "Look at that," he said. "Soup for lunch." Noah's eyes went wide. "The good kind?" "Only the good kind for you two," Ray said. They searched more houses. Ray moved careful and slow, always keeping the twins in sight. He found a small first aid kit in a bathroom drawer. He found matches, candles, and a flashlight that still worked. He found blankets, folded and clean, in a closet. Little by little, the kids stopped hiding behind him and started helping. Mia spotted a jar of peanut butter on a high shelf. "There," she pointed. "Good eye," Ray said, and he lifted her up so she could grab it herself. She giggled. It was a small sound, but it warmed him all the way through. Noah found a box of crackers under a table. He held it up proud, like he had caught a fish. "You're a good finder," Ray told him. Noah stood up a little taller after that. Ray found tools, too. A hammer, a box of nails, a saw, a roll of strong tape. He gathered them in an old bag he found by a door. His mechanic's hands knew what to do with tools. Give him something broken, and he could fix it. That was one thing in this world he understood. By afternoon, they had enough food for a few days. But Ray knew they needed something more. A real place to stay. That old house with the drafty rooms and broken closet would not do. It was too big, too cold, too full of bad memories for the little ones. He picked a smaller house at the end of the lane. It had a busted window and a hole in the roof, but the walls were solid and the fireplace was clean. "This one," he said. "This is going to be home, for now." He set the twins on the front step with a blanket and the crackers. "You two watch me work," he said. "Tell me if I mess up." "You won't mess up," Mia said. Ray smiled. "We'll see." He got to work. He nailed a board over the broken window and stuffed the cracks with rags to keep the cold out. He climbed up and patched the hole in the roof with a piece of tin from a shed and a whole lot of nails. His arms ached, his shoulders burned, but he kept going. The twins watched every move. Noah handed him nails when he asked, Mia held the flashlight when the light got dim. "You're strong," Noah said, watching Ray lift a heavy beam. "Nah," Ray said, wiping sweat from his brow. "I just don't quit. That's different than strong." When the house was tight and warm, Ray built the beds. He took cushions from a couch and boards from a broken table. He hammered together 2 little frames, low to the ground so the kids wouldn't fall. He layered the cushions and the clean blankets on top. "Beds," he announced. "One for Mia, one for Noah." Mia touched hers like she could not believe it. "This one's mine?" "All yours." That night, Ray made warm soup over the fire. The kids ate until their bellies were full. Then he tucked them into their beds and pulled the blankets up to their chins. "Warm enough?" he asked. "Warm," Noah mumbled, already half asleep. Mia caught his hand. "Are you staying?" "I'm staying," Ray said. "Right here." He sat by the fire. He watched them drift off, safe and full and warm. For the first time since the storm, the twins slept through the night. The next morning, Ray woke before the twins. Gray light crept through the boarded window. His back was sore. His neck had a crick in it from sleeping in the hard chair. But he did not complain. He looked at the 2 little bundles in their beds. Mia had kicked her blanket half off. Noah slept with his thumb near his mouth. Ray pulled Mia's blanket back up, gentle as he could. Then he turned to the kitchen and faced his biggest challenge yet. Breakfast. Ray scratched his beard. He had cooked for himself plenty of times. Beans over a fire, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. But that was rough food for a rough man. These were little kids. They needed something soft, something good. He found a can of peaches and the bag of rice. He found a small pot. He set to work. The rice was harder than it looked. He put in too much water, then not enough. The bottom stuck to the pot and turned a sad shade of brown. He scraped it and frowned. "Come on," he muttered. "It's just rice." But the rice did not listen. Behind him, a small voice spoke. "It smells funny?" Ray turned. Mia stood there in her rumpled clothes, hair sticking up every which way. She looked at the pot with a wrinkled nose. "Yeah," Ray admitted. "I burned it a little." "A lot," Noah said, appearing beside his sister. He rubbed his sleepy eyes. Ray laughed, short and rough. "You 2 are tough critics." He tried again. This time he watched the pot close. He stirred it slow. He opened the peaches and spooned some sweet fruit into 2 little bowls. When the rice finally turned soft and white, he mixed in a bit of peach juice to make it sweet. "There," he said, setting the bowls down. "Breakfast, rice and peaches, a fancy meal." The twins climbed onto the crates Ray had set out as chairs. They stared at the food. "Is it going to taste good?" Noah asked. "Only one way to find out," Ray said. Mia took a tiny bite. She chewed slow. Then she took another bite. And another. "It's good," she said, surprised. Noah tried his. His face lit up. "It is good." Ray felt something swell in his chest. He had cooked plenty of meals in his life, but none of them ever felt like this one. He tried to braid Mia's messy hair after breakfast. His big fingers fumbled with the little strands. The braid came out crooked and lumpy, more knot than braid. Mia touched it and giggled. "It looks silly," she said. "I never claimed to be good at it," Ray said. He undid the mess and just smoothed her hair back instead. "How about we call that a work in progress?" She nodded, happy enough. The day passed slow and steady. Ray fixed a leaky spot he had missed on the roof. He cleaned out the fireplace. He let Noah hand him nails again, and the boy took the job serious, like it was the most important work in the world. By evening, Ray had learned a few things. He learned that Maya liked to talk. He learned that Noah watched everything with quiet, careful eyes. He learned that when he got down on their level and really listened, they leaned toward him like little plants leaning toward the sun. For dinner, Ray made the soup again, but this time he added rice to make it thick and filling. He set the bowls out on the crates. The fire crackled warm. He tried to be funny. He did not know why. Maybe he just wanted to see them smile. "You know," he said, slurping his soup loud on purpose, "back home, they call me the best cook in 3 counties. Mia raised an eyebrow. "You burned the rice this morning." "That," Ray said, "was an experiment. All great cooks experiment." Noah snorted. Then he slurped his own soup, louder than Ray, on purpose. Ray gasped, pretending to be shocked. "Now that is bad manners." He slurped even louder. Noah slurped back. Soon it was a contest, the two of them making the silliest noises they could. And then it happened. Mia laughed. A real laugh, bright and full. Noah joined her, giggling so hard he nearly spilled his bowl. The sound filled the little house. It bounced off the walls and rose up to the patched roof. Ray went still. He looked at the 2 children laughing in the firelight, their faces bright, their fear melting away for the first time in days. Something warm and quiet settled deep in his chest. He was helping them. Really helping them. And he understood, right then, that they were healing. The morning after the laughing contest, Ray woke with a new kind of purpose. The twins were healing. That much was clear, but there was still a puzzle he could not shake. A whole village stood empty around them, houses full of dishes and toys and photographs. Where had all these people gone? He needed to know. He fed the twins their breakfast. Rice again, but this time he got it right. Soft and white, no burned bottom. Mia gave him a nod of approval, which felt like winning a prize. "You two stay close," he told them. "I need to look around some, fix a few more things." Noah handed him a nail from the little pile he liked to guard. "For the roof?" "For the roof," Ray agreed, tucking it behind his ear. He worked the morning away. He patched a crack near the door. He tightened the loose boards on the front step. He kept the twins in sight, letting them play with a wooden truck Ray had found under a bed. But between the fixing, Ray watched. He looked at the village with new eyes. Something was wrong, and not the way he first thought. When he first rode in, he had figured a disaster hit. A flood, maybe. A quake. People running for their lives, grabbing what they could. But that was not what he saw now. The doors were closed, not broken, not left swinging in the wind. Closed careful, like folks meant to come back. The windows in most houses were latched tight, curtains drawn neat. In one yard, a garden hose was coiled up and hung on a hook. People running from danger did not coil their hoses. Ray walked slow through the empty lanes while the twins napped in the afternoon. He kept the door in view, but his mind churned. In one house, he found the kitchen clean. Dishes stacked and dry. The icebox emptied out on purpose, wiped down. In another, the beds were stripped, the sheets folded and set on top of the mattress. This was not chaos. This was planned. Ray stood in the middle of a stranger's living room and felt a cold prickle run up his neck. Whole families had packed up and left, quiet and careful, all at the same time, like they knew exactly when to go. But why? And why leave the twins behind? That last question gnawed at him worst of all. Whatever happened here, it was organized. Somebody had thought this through. And 2 little kids do not just slip through the cracks of a plan like that. Not unless something went wrong. He kept looking. In the 4th house, the biggest one on the lane, Ray found the answer he had been hunting. The place had a wide front room with a big stone fireplace. Above the mantel, a family photo hung crooked. Ray straightened it out of habit. Then he noticed the floorboard near the hearth. It sat a hair higher than the rest. He knelt down, ran his rough fingers along the edge. Loose. He pried it up. Underneath sat a wooden box, and beside it, a canvas sack. Ray pulled them both out and set them on the floor. The sack was full of supplies, canned goods, a flashlight, matches wrapped in wax paper, bottles of water. Somebody had hidden these on purpose, saved them for later. Ray opened the box next. Inside was a thick stack of letters, tied with string. His big hands worked the knot loose. He unfolded the top page and held it toward the window light. The handwriting was neat and small. If you are reading this, then you are one of us, or you are a friend. We did not run because we were scared of a storm. We left because of Victor Hale. Ray's breath caught. He read on. Hale wants our land. He offered to buy it cheap, and when we said no, the trouble started. Broken fences, strange fires, threats we could not prove. He wants the whole village to look unsafe, so the county forces us out, so he can pay pennies for our homes. We are gathering proof. We left together, quiet, so he cannot hurt anyone while we fight him. We will come back when it is safe. This land is ours, and we will not give it up. Ray lowered the letter. His hands were shaking. The village had not abandoned anyone. They had run from a wolf named Victor Hale. Ray barely slept that night. The letters sat beside his bed, and his mind would not go quiet. When morning came, he made the twins their breakfast. Rice again, and this time Mia did not even check the bottom of the pot. She just ate. Noah lined up 3 of his nails next to his bowl like little soldiers. You two play here, Ray said gently. I got some reading to do. He settled into the old chair by the window, while the twins pushed the wooden truck across the floor. The morning sun spilled across his lap. He untied the string on the stack of letters and started from the top, 1 page at a time. Slow, careful. He wanted to understand everything. The first few letters told the same story as the one he had already read. Victor Hale, the broken fences, the fires nobody could explain. But as Ray dug deeper into the pile, the picture grew clearer, and it hit him harder than he expected. These people had a plan, a good one. One letter, written in a shaky older hand, laid it all out. The families would leave together, all on the same day, and travel to a town 2 hours down the mountain. There they would gather with a lawyer. They had photos. They had names. They had proof of the threats Hale made. They only needed to stay away long enough to build their case and bring it to the county. We come back the moment it is safe, the letter read. Not one family stays behind. We go together, and we return together. Ray read that line twice. Not one family stays behind. So what happened? He kept reading. Near the bottom of the stack, he found a note that was different from the rest. It was hurried. The letters slanted and messy, like the writer had no time. Storm coming faster than we thought. Roads washing out. We have to move now or lose the chance. Everyone accounted for. Ready to go. Ray lowered the paper and stared at the wall. Everyone accounted for. But that was not true. 2 of them had been left behind. 2 small ones, hiding in a closet, living on scraps and rainwater. He looked over at Mia and Noah. They were laughing at something. The truck flipped on its side, and for a moment Ray just watched them. The pieces came together in his head, slow and awful. The storm had hit early. The families packed up in a rush, moving fast, panicked by the rising water and the washing roads. In all that hurry, somewhere in the chaos, somebody had thought the twins were with someone else, and that someone had thought the twins were with a different family. A crack in the plan. A mistake made in the dark and the rain. Nobody meant to leave them, but they had left them all the same. Ray felt his chest go tight. He knew that feeling. He knew what it was to be the one forgotten, the one who slipped through when everyone was busy saving themselves. And he could not imagine how scared these two had been, watching every car pull away, waiting for someone who never came back. "They didn't mean it," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone. Mia looked up. "Mean what, Uncle Ray?" He shook his head and smiled. "Nothing, little bird, nothing at all." The day passed. He fixed things. He fed them. He read them a story from a book he found on a shelf, stumbling over the big words and making the twins giggle at his growling voice for the wolf. But as evening came and the sky turned gold, Ray stepped outside to bring in the wooden truck Noah had left in the yard. That was when he saw it. Down at the far end of the lane, past the last house, a vehicle sat parked in the shadows of the trees. A dark truck, clean and new, nothing like the beat-up rigs the villagers drove. Ray went still. On the side door, painted in bold white letters, were words he had just read 100 times in those letters. Hale Land Development. His blood ran cold. Somebody was watching the village. Somebody was here. And whatever danger the villagers had run from, it had not gone anywhere. It was still coming. Ray was up before the sun. He did not tell the twins about the truck. There was no reason to scare them. Instead, he moved quiet through the gray morning, checking every door and every window, his mind sharp and steady the way it got when trouble was near. The little house needed to hold. That was the plan. If someone came looking, the twins had to be safe behind walls that would not give. He found scrap wood stacked behind the shed and got to work. He nailed a fresh board across the back window where the latch was broken. He wedged a heavy dresser closer to the door, easy for him to move but hard for anyone else. He tested the floor near the closet, the same closet where he had first found them, and made sure the space inside was clear and clean. A hiding spot, just in case. He hated even thinking it, but he thought it anyway. The whole time, he kept his eyes on that lane. The dark truck was gone now. That did not comfort him. A truck that could leave could just as easily come back. "Uncle Ray?" Mia's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her too big shirt, hair sticking up every which way, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why you banging so much?" "Just making things strong, little bird," he said. He set down the hammer and knelt to her level. "You know how the wind blows hard sometimes? I want this house to laugh at the wind. I want it to say, 'Blow all you want, I ain't moving.'" Mia giggled. Noah appeared behind her, clutching one of his nails, watching Ray work with those big, careful eyes of his. "Can I help?" Noah asked, so soft Ray almost missed it. Something warm cracked open in Ray's chest. The boy hardly ever asked for anything. "You sure can," Ray said. He handed Noah a small block of wood and a dull nail that could not hurt anybody. "You practice hammering right here on the porch. Show me what you got." Noah's face lit up like a lantern. He set the nail against the block, tongue poking out in concentration, and gave it a tiny tap. Then another. Ray watched him and felt, for a strange, sad second, like the luckiest man alive. The day moved on. Ray patched. He hammered. He fed them lunch and let them nap while he stood at the window with a cup of cold coffee, watching the lane. Nobody came. Not Hale. Not his people. But as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange, somebody else did. Ray heard the engines first, old ones coughing and rattling up the mountain road. He stepped onto the porch, one hand resting easy near the door where the twins played inside. Trucks, 3 of them, beat up and mud-splattered, nothing like the clean, dark rig from the night before. They rolled into the village slow, and Ray saw faces pressed to the windows. faces that went from tired to shocked the moment they spotted him. The villagers had come home. The first truck stopped. A man climbed out, broad and weathered, and stared at Ray standing there in his leather jacket, tattoos climbing up his neck, boots planted wide on the porch of a house that was not his. "Who the devil are you?" the man said. His voice was hard. Behind him, more doors opened. More people stepped out. An older woman with silver hair pulled a shawl tight around her shoulders and looked at Ray like he was the storm come back to finish the job. "Easy," Ray said, keeping his hands where they could see them. "Name's Ray. I ain't here to cause trouble." "A biker," someone muttered. "In our village, in one of our houses." The words came sharp with suspicion. Ray had heard that tone his whole life. He did not flinch. He just stood there and let them look. Then the door creaked open behind him. "Uncle Ray!" Mia burst out onto the porch, cheeks pink, a smile stretched wide across her face. Noah followed close, holding his little block of wood up like a treasure. "Look what Noah made! We've been building all day!" The villagers went silent. The old woman's mouth fell open. She stared at the twins, then at Ray, then back at the children again. Every hard line on her face began to soften into something like confusion. Because these were not scared children. These were happy ones. And that did not match the frightening man at all. Morning came soft and clear. The storm had left its mark everywhere. Roofs sagged. Fences leaned like tired old men. Mud crawled up doorsteps and swallowed gardens whole. The villagers stood in the middle of it all, looking lost in their own home. Ray did not wait to be asked. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He started with the old woman's house, the one with silver hair and hard eyes. Her name was Evelyn, he had learned. Her roof had a hole big enough to drop a bucket through. Ray climbed up without a word, hammer in his belt, and began laying fresh boards across the gap. At first, nobody helped. They watched. They whispered. But Ray just kept working. He fixed Evelyn's roof. Then he hauled a fallen tree off the Morales family's fence. Then he waded into a flooded shed and carried out boxes of soaked photographs, setting each one careful in the sun to dry. Family faces, weddings, babies, things that could never be replaced. "You don't have to do that," a young mother said, watching him spread the pictures across a table. "I know," Ray said. He wiped his hands on his jeans. "But they matter to somebody. That's reason enough." The twins were never far. Mia trailed behind him with a little basket, picking up nails and scraps of wood, proud as could be. Noah carried his block everywhere, offering to help fix whatever Ray touched. When Ray knelt to lift a heavy beam, Noah knelt right beside him, grunting like he was doing all the work himself. The villagers noticed. They noticed how Ray stopped every hour to check on the children, how he made sure they ate, how he pulled Mia's hair out of her eyes with fingers too big for such a gentle job, how he lifted Noah onto his shoulders so the boy could see the mountains, and how the child laughed like the world was brand new. By afternoon, something had shifted. A man handed Ray a second hammer without a word. Another brought him water. Slowly, one by one, the villagers began working beside him instead of just watching. They rebuilt together. They cleared the road. They dried out homes. They dug gardens back out of the mud. Ray showed a group of men how to brace a leaning wall so it would hold. He showed a boy how to swing a hammer straight. Everywhere he went, the work got easier, because he made people believe it could be done. Evelyn found him near the well as the sun began to sink. She held a cup of hot coffee, real and steaming, and pushed it into his hands. "I judged you," she said plainly. "First moment I saw you, I judged you." Ray took the cup. "Most folks do. You've been carrying those children like they're your own." Her eyes searched his face. Why? Ray looked over at the twins. Mia was showing Noah how to make a flower crown out of weeds, both of them laughing in the golden light. Because somebody left them, Ray said quiet. And I know what that feels like. I ain't about to do it too. Evelyn was silent a long moment. Then she nodded, slow and sure, and something in her hard face finally broke all the way open. You're a good man, Ray, she said. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Night fell gentle over the village. Somebody built a fire in the middle of the square, and the villagers gathered around it, tired but warm. Somebody else brought out bread and stew from what little they had, and they shared it all the same. Ray sat on an overturned crate, a twin tucked under each arm, both of them half asleep against his chest. Nobody looked at him with fear anymore. They looked at him the way you look at a neighbor, a friend, one of their own. The broad, weathered man who had first snarled, "Who the devil are you?" now crossed the square and sat down heavy beside Ray. He stared into the fire for a while before he spoke. "Name's Frank," he said. He held out a rough, calloused hand. Ray shook it. "You did good today," Frank said. "Real good." Around the fire, faces glowed warm and open, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ray felt like he belonged somewhere. The next morning, Ray woke with the sun. The village was quiet, still, wrapped in a soft, gray light. He had slept in the little house, one twin on each side, and now he slipped out careful so he wouldn't wake them. He needed to find Thomas. That was why he had come. And now, more than ever, he felt the pull of it deep in his chest. There was a small building near the center of the village, old and square, with a faded sign hung crooked over the door. It had been some kind of meeting hall once, Evelyn told him, a place where the village kept its records, births, deaths, land papers, everything that mattered. Ray pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dust hung thick in the air. Shelves lined the walls, packed with boxes and folders and stacks of paper gone yellow with age. A big wooden table sat in the middle, covered in more of the same. He didn't hear the little feet behind him until Mia spoke. "We help?" Ray turned. There they stood in the doorway, both of them rubbing sleep from their eyes. Noah still clutched his wooden block. Ray almost told them no. Then he saw the way they looked at him, so eager, so ready. He sighed and waved them in. "All right," he said, "but you gotta be gentle. These papers are old." Mia nodded like she'd been handed the most important job in the world. They worked through the morning. Ray sat at the table, going through folder after folder, his big fingers turning pages slow. The twins sat on the floor with a low box between them, pulling out photographs one at a time and holding them up for Ray to see. "This one?" Noah would ask. "Nope," Ray would say. "Keep looking." "This one?" Mia would ask. "Not that either, sweetheart." He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. A name, a face, anything that might tell him where Thomas had gone. He hadn't seen his old friend in years, but the last letter Thomas sent had come from this village. Ray had kept it folded in his jacket pocket all this time, the paper soft and worn from reading. Around noon, Evelyn brought them bread and cheese. She stood in the doorway a moment, watching the three of them work. "You're looking for someone," she said. Ray nodded. "A friend. Thomas. Came here a while back. You know him?" Something flickered across Evelyn's face, but before she could speak, Mia let out a little gasp. "Look!" the girl cried, holding up a photograph. "That man, he nice!" Ray took it from her small hands. It was an old picture, faded at the edges. A group of villagers stood together in front of the meeting hall, smiling. And there, Near the back was a face Ray knew. Older than he remembered. Grayer. But the same kind eyes, the same crooked smile. Thomas. Ray's heart kicked hard in his chest. "That's him," he breathed. "That's my friend." Evelyn came closer and looked over his shoulder. Her face went soft and sad all at once. "Thomas," she murmured. "He lived here. Good man. He left with the rest of us during the trouble. But—" She paused. "He came back. During the storm. Said he couldn't leave something behind." Ray sat up straight. "Came back? When?" "The night the storm hit hardest," Evelyn said. "We tried to stop him. The roads were washing out, but he wouldn't listen. Said there was something up the mountain he had to reach." Ray was on his feet now, the photograph still in his hand. He tore through the rest of the papers with new purpose, and there, tucked inside a folder near the back, he found it. A note in shaky handwriting. Thomas's handwriting. He knew it anywhere. "Going back for the children. Won't leave them. Taking the old north road toward the ridge. If I don't make it, tell them I tried." Ray's hands trembled. He rushed outside, the twins hurrying after him. At the edge of the village, where the mud gave way to broken ground, he found it. Tire tracks, half washed away but still there. They cut a rough path away from the houses, up toward the dark shape of the mountain. Toward the remote ridge in the north. The trail led straight up into the wild, lonely heights. Early the next morning, before the sun had even climbed over the ridge, Ray was ready. He packed a bag with rope and water, some bread, a first aid kit Evelyn had dug out from her cellar, and a heavy flashlight. He wore his leather jacket zipped up tight against the cold mountain air. The trail was waiting, and every hour mattered. The hardest part was the goodbye. Mia and Noah stood at the door of the little house, still wrapped in blankets, their faces pale in the gray light. Mia's lip trembled. "You come back?" she whispered. Ray knelt down so he was eye to eye with her. He put one big hand on her small shoulder and the other on Noah's. "I'm coming back," he said. "I promise you that, but I gotta go up the mountain and find someone. Someone real important." Noah's little hand grabbed the hem of Ray's jacket and held on. "Don't go!" Ray's throat went tight. He knew what those words cost the boy. He knew the fear behind them. "Listen to me," Ray said, his voice low and steady. "Nobody's leaving you, not ever. Miss Evelyn's gonna take real good care of you while I'm gone. And when I come back, I'm gonna have somebody with me. Somebody who's been trying to reach you for a long, long time." Evelyn stepped forward and rested her hands gently on the children's heads. "Come now, little ones. Let's make some breakfast. Uncle Ray has work to do." Ray stood. He looked at the twins one last time, tucking the picture of them safe in his mind. Then he turned and walked toward the trail before his heart could talk him out of it. The climb was hard. The old north road was more mud than road now. The storm had torn it up bad, leaving deep ruts and fallen branches everywhere. Ray followed the tire tracks where he could, and where he couldn't, he followed his gut. Up and up he went, through thick pine and slick rock, the village shrinking small below him. The morning turned to noon. His legs ached. His breath came hard. But he did not stop. He thought about Thomas the whole way, the man who had taught him all those years ago that a person's worth wasn't in how they looked or where they came from. Thomas had been the first man to shake Ray's hand and mean it. The first man who saw past the leather and the tattoos and the frown. "You got a good heart, Ray," Thomas used to say. "Don't let the world tell you different." Ray had spent his whole life trying to believe those words. The afternoon wore on. Shadows grew long. The sun dipped low, painting the mountain gold and orange. Ray was tired down to his bones, and still he climbed. Then he saw it. Down a steep slope, where the road curved sharp along the ridge, a truck lay on its side. Its front end was crushed against a great gray boulder. The metal was twisted, the windows shattered. Rain and mud had half buried the wheels. Ray's heart froze. "Thomas!" he shouted. His voice echoed off the rocks. "Thomas!" He scrambled down the slope, sliding on loose stones, his hands scraping the ground. He reached the truck and looked inside. The seat was empty. For one terrible second, Ray thought the worst. Then he heard it. A weak, ragged sound. A cough. He turned. A few feet away, half hidden under a fallen tree branch and a torn tarp, lay a man. Thin. Gray. His leg twisted at a wrong angle, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood. But his eyes were open. "Thomas," Ray breathed. He dropped to his knees beside his old friend and cradled his head. Thomas blinked up at him, slow, like he was surfacing from deep water. Then something moved across his cracked lips. A smile. That same crooked smile from the photograph. "Ray," Thomas whispered. "You came. I knew you would." "I got you," Ray said, his voice breaking. "I got you now. You're gonna be okay." Thomas grabbed his wrist with weak, shaking fingers, his eyes filled with tears. "The children," he gasped. "Mia, Noah, please. They're mine. My grandbabies. Tell me they're alive." Ray held his old friend through the night. He wrapped Thomas in the tarp and his own leather jacket to fight off the cold. He cleaned the wounds as best he could with the first aid kit. He splinted the broken leg with a branch and the rope, moving slow and careful, whispering steady words the whole time. "You're mine," Thomas said again, over and over, like he was afraid Ray might vanish. "The twins, mine." "I know," Ray said softly. "I know now, and they're safe. You hear me? They're safe. They're waiting on you." Thomas wept then, big, silent tears rolling down his dirty cheeks. And Ray, the man everyone feared, held him close and let him cry. When the first light crept over the ridge, Ray got to work. He couldn't carry Thomas alone, not all the way down that broken road. So he did what he knew how to do. He built. He lashed branches together into a rough sled, padded it with the tarp and every scrap of soft thing he had. He tied the rope tight and tested every knot twice. "This is gonna hurt," Ray warned. Thomas managed a weak laugh. "Everything hurts, son. Just get me home." The trip down was slow and brutal. Ray pulled the sled step by careful step, easing it over rocks and around ruts, his shoulders burning, his hands raw. He never let it slip. Not once. Every time Thomas groaned, Ray stopped and steadied him and kept going. "Tell me about them," Thomas said through gritted teeth. "The children. Tell me." So Ray talked. He told Thomas how Mia was brave, and how she said the things nobody else could say. He told him how Noah liked to fix things, how the boy watched everything with those big, careful eyes. He told him about the bedtime stories, and the burned suppers, and the little house he'd patched up with his own 2 hands. Thomas listened, and slowly the pain in his face softened into something like peace. The sun was high when they finally came around the last bend, and the village opened up below them. Ray saw them before they saw him. 2 tiny figures stood at the edge of the clearing, right where the trail met the first houses. Evelyn stood behind them, one hand on each little shoulder. They had been waiting. Ray understood at once that they had been waiting all morning, maybe all night, refusing to leave that spot. Mia saw him first. She went stiff. Her whole body froze. Then she saw the sled. She saw the gray-haired man wrapped in blankets. "Grandpa," she said, It came out so quiet the wind nearly took it. "Grandpa!" She broke into a run. Noah tore after her, his short legs pumping, both of them crying out that one word again and again. Ray stopped the sled and stepped back. This moment wasn't his. It never had been. Mia reached the sled and threw herself down beside it, her small hands grabbing Thomas's arm, his shoulder, his face. Noah dropped next to her, sobbing, pressing his cheek against the old man's chest. "You came back," Mia wept. "You came back! You came back!" Thomas's face crumpled. He lifted one shaking, bruised hand and laid it on Mia's head, then reached the other for Noah, pulling them both as close as his broken body would allow. "My babies," he whispered. "My sweet babies. I never stopped trying to reach you. Never. Not for one single minute. I'm so sorry it took so long." "We thought," Noah hiccuped. "We thought nobody was coming." "Somebody came," Thomas said. His wet eyes lifted, past the children's heads, to the big man standing quiet in his shadow. "Somebody stayed with you when I couldn't." Ray shifted his weight, suddenly not sure where to look. Thomas reached out his hand. Ray hesitated, then stepped close and took it. The old man's grip, weak as it was, held on tight. "You kept them alive, Ray," Thomas said, his voice thick. "You kept them safe when I couldn't. You gave them a father when they had nobody." A tear slid down into his gray beard. I always knew you had a good heart. Thank you. Thank you for staying, my friend." Ray couldn't speak. His throat had closed up tight, so he just held on and nodded and let his own tears fall at last. The morning after the reunion, the little house was warm and full. Evelyn had brought soup. The whole village, it seemed, had brought something. Bread, blankets, a jar of honey. They lined the small table and covered every shelf. Thomas lay propped up on the mended bed Ray had built, a child tucked against each side of him, both of them refusing to leave even for a moment. Ray sat on a stool near the door, a mug of coffee going cold in his big hands. "There's something you need to know," Thomas said. His voice was stronger now. A night of rest and warm food had brought some color back into his gray face. "About why this village emptied out. About why my grandchildren ended up alone in a closet." The room went quiet. Evelyn set down her spoon. "His name is Victor Hale," Thomas said. The word came out bitter, like something spoiled. "He's a rich man, a land buyer. He came sniffing around here more than a year ago, wanting to buy up the whole valley cheap." "We told him no," Evelyn said softly. "Every family. We told him this land wasn't for sale." Thomas nodded. "But men like Hale don't hear no. They just find another way." He reached for the water cup, and Ray was up and handing it to him before he could even ask. "Hale started a story. Told folks the ground here was poisoned, that the storms were dangerous, that the whole village was going to wash off the mountain one day. He wanted everybody scared enough to run so he could scoop up the land for pennies." "So the village left," Ray said slowly, the pieces coming together at last. "On purpose." "We planned it," Thomas said. "Quiet. Everybody would slip out during the big storm and gather down in the town below. We were building a case against him, getting lawyers, getting proof. We just needed a little time." His face darkened. "I was bringing the little ones out last. My daughter was already down the mountain. I was supposed to grab the twins and follow." He closed his eyes. "Then my truck went off the road." Mia pressed closer against his side. "That's why nobody came," Thomas whispered. "Not because anybody stopped loving you. Because the one man carrying you got trapped on a mountain with a broke leg." The room was silent for a long moment. "You said proof," Ray finally said. You said you had proof against him. Thomas's tired eyes sharpened. We do. Papers, real ones. Hale put things in writing he never should have. Letters, fake safety reports he paid a man to sign. A signed order telling his people to cut off our water and our road. His breath came shorter now. It's all hidden. Kept safe. Buried right here in the village where he'd never think to look. Where? Ray said. The old well house, Thomas said. Behind the church. There's a loose stone in the back wall, down low, near the floor. Everything's sealed up behind it in a metal box. His hand found Ray's arm. If that man gets his way, every family here loses everything. Their homes, their whole lives. You have to find it, Ray. Ray was already standing. He gathered the villagers as the afternoon light stretched long and gold across the valley. A dozen of them followed him to the little stone well house behind the crumbling church, its walls green with moss, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Ray knelt in the dirt and ran his rough hands along the back wall, stone by stone, searching. The villagers held their breath. Evelyn held a lantern high. Then he felt it. One stone that shifted under his fingers. He worked it loose, slow and careful, and set it aside. Behind it, in a small, dark hollow, sat a dented metal box. Ray pulled it out. His hands weren't quite steady as he lifted the lid. Inside lay a thick stack of papers, dry and safe. Ray drew them out into the light. Letters on fancy company paper. A fake safety report stamped and signed. And there, plain as day, an order with Victor Hale's own signature, commanding his men to shut off the water and block the only road out. Evelyn gasped. A murmur ran through the crowd like wind through wheat. It's real, she breathed. It's all here. Ray looked down at the proof in his hands. The next morning came gray and cool. A soft mist hung low over the valley, curling around the rooftops like smoke. Ray stood outside the little house with his phone pressed to his ear. He had walked to the top of the hill, the only place where the signal held steady. The papers were safe now, locked in Evelyn's cellar. But Ray knew paper alone wouldn't stop a man like Victor Hale. Hale had money. Hale had lawyers. And when men like that got backed into a corner, they didn't always play fair. Ray needed help, the kind of help that showed up fast and didn't ask a lot of questions. Jack, he said when the line clicked. It's Ray. There was a pause, then a laugh, warm and rough. Well, I'll be. Thought you fell off the earth, brother. Where you been hiding? Long story, Ray said. He looked down at the village below, at the smoke rising from chimneys, at the children he could just see playing near the well house. I need you. Me and some folks up here are in a fix. There's a rich man trying to steal a whole village out from under some good people. I got kids up here, Jack. Little ones. And I got no one else to call. The laugh faded. When Jack spoke again, his voice was steady and sure. Say when and say where. I'll bring the guys. No trouble, Ray said quickly. You hear me? No fighting. These people already scared enough. I just need hands, strong backs. Roofs need fixing. Folks need to know somebody's standing with them. Roofs and backs, Jack said. We can do that. Send me the road. We'll be up by evening. Ray hung up and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. But not everyone in the village felt the same. By mid-morning, word had spread. Ray had called for bikers, more men like him. Leather jackets, loud engines, rough beards. He saw it in their faces as he walked back through the village. Old Mr. Peterson gripping his fence a little tighter. Two women whispering behind their hands near the water pump. A young father pulling his boy closer to his side. Evelyn found him near the church, her lips pressed thin with worry. Ray, she said gently. Some folks are frightened. They hear motorcycle gang, and they think of trouble, of noise, of men who take what they want. She touched his arm. I know your heart, dear. But they don't. Not yet. Ray looked down at her. Something old and tired moved behind his eyes. He had lived his whole life watching people cross the street when they saw him coming, watching mothers pull their children away. I know what folks think when they see us, he said quietly. Believe me, I know it better than anybody. He looked out toward the road that wound down the mountain. But my friends are good men, Evelyn. Better than most. All I can do is let them show it. Evelyn studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded and gave his arm a small squeeze. Then I'll stand with you when they come. The hours passed slow. The mist burned off, and the sun climbed high, and folks kept glancing nervously toward the road. Then, just as the light began to soften into gold, they heard it. The low rumble of engines, rolling up the mountain like distant thunder. The whole village seemed to freeze. Doors cracked open, curtains twitched. Mia and Noah ran to Ray and gripped his legs, and he rested a big hand on each small head. Around the last bend came the bikes. 12 of them, chrome flashing in the sun, and Jack Morales at the front, big and bearded and grinning wide. But there were no shouts, no revving, no trouble. The engines cut off one by one, and in the sudden quiet, the men climbed down. And Ray saw what they'd brought. Not weapons. Ladders, lumber, toolboxes strapped to their bikes, bags of nails and rolls of roofing. Jack walked straight up to Ray, pulled him into a rough hug, then turned to the watching villagers and lifted a hammer high above his head. All right, folks, he called out, his voice warm and easy. Somebody show us which roofs need fixing. We didn't ride all this way to stand around. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Evelyn stepped forward, smiling. This way, she said. There's plenty to do. And slow but sure, the village began to open its arms. The morning came clear and bright. The sound of hammers already rang through the village, steady and hopeful, when the first black car rolled up the mountain road. Then another. And another. 3 shiny cars, so clean they looked out of place against the mud and gravel. They rolled to a stop near the church, and the doors opened. Victor Hale stepped out. He was a tall man in a gray suit that fit him like it had been made just for him. His shoes shone. His hair was slicked back, neat. He looked at the village the way a man looks at a stain on his shirt, with disgust, with impatience. Behind him came his men, 6 of them, all in dark suits, carrying folders and clipboards. They spread out slow like they already owned the ground beneath their feet. The hammers stopped, one by one. The villagers gathered close, drawn together by fear. Mothers held their children. Old men stood stiff. Evelyn came out from the little house, wiping her hands on her apron, her face gone pale. Hale smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind that never reached the eyes. Good morning, he called out, his voice smooth as glass. I see you've all come back. How touching. He clasped his hands together. But I'm afraid you've wasted a trip. This land no longer belongs to you. The paperwork is being finalized as we speak. A murmur ran through the crowd. Frightened. Uncertain. Now, Hale went on, walking slow among them. I'm a reasonable man. I'll give each family a small payment to help you relocate. Something fair. But you must be gone by the end of the week. This place is unsafe. The storms, the floods. He waved a hand. No place to raise children. At the word children, Ray felt Mia's small hand slip into his. Noah pressed against his other leg. Ray stepped forward. The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Ray was a big man, and in the morning light his leather jacket looked black as night. His beard, his boots, his heavy walk. He was everything Hale expected a rough man to be. Hale looked him up and down and smirked. "And who might you be? The hired muscle?" "My name's Ray," he said. His voice was low and calm. "And you're standing on land that isn't yours yet." Hale chuckled. "Ah, so you're the biker I've heard about. The one playing house with a couple of orphans." He shook his head. "How very charming. But this is business, friend. And business doesn't care about sad little stories." Something flickered in Ray's chest. Old anger. Old hurt. But he kept it down. He didn't shout. He didn't raise a fist. He just looked Hale square in the eye. "You made this village look unsafe on purpose," Ray said. "You wanted these folks scared so they'd sell cheap. But they didn't run. And they've got papers now. Papers that show exactly what you did." For just a moment, the smirk on Hale's face slipped. His eyes narrowed. Behind Ray, feet began to shuffle. Then Evelyn stepped up beside him. Then Jack, hammer still in his hand. Then old Mr. Peterson. Then the two women from the water pump. One by one, the villagers moved forward until they stood in a wall behind Ray, shoulder to shoulder, frightened, but together. Hale looked at them all. His jaw tightened. "You think this changes anything?" he said. His voice had lost its smooth edge now. It had gone hard and thin. "A ragged crowd and one dressed-up criminal? You have no idea who you're dealing with." "We know exactly who we're dealing with," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but strong. Hale's face went red. He pointed a finger straight at Ray. "Fine," he snapped. "Have it your way. But I promise you this. I have lawyers you can't afford, judges who take my calls, loopholes you've never even heard of." He backed toward his car, his men falling in around him. "I will use every legal method I have to take this land. Every single one. And when I'm done, there won't be a scrap of this village left for any of you." The days that followed moved fast and steady, like a river after rain. Ray woke before the sun each morning. He drank his coffee black and got to work. The little house became more than a home now. It became a headquarters. Papers covered the kitchen table. Old letters, photographs, copies of documents the villagers had gathered while they were hiding away. Thomas sat at the head of the table most days, a blanket over his knees. His leg was still healing, but his mind was sharp as ever. He knew this village better than anyone. He knew which families had owned which plots for generations. He knew the names, the dates, the stories. "Here," he said one afternoon, tapping a yellowed paper with a shaking finger. "This deed goes back 60 years. Hale's people said this land had no clear owner. That's a lie. It's right here in black and white." Ray leaned close and studied it. "Then we make copies, lots of them. We keep some here and send some to the lawyer in town." Jack helped too. He rode his bike down the mountain and came back with a box full of supplies. A scanner, a printer, fresh ink. He set it all up on the porch and got to work copying every scrap of proof they had. "Never thought I'd be doing office work," Jack said with a grin, wiping ink off his hands. "But for these kids, I'd type all day." Evelyn organized the villagers. She knocked on every door. She gathered their memories, their written accounts of the strange things Hale's men had done. The fake safety signs, the blocked roads, the rumors spread to make people scared. One old man remembered seeing a truck dump mud into the river to make the water look poisoned. Evelyn wrote it all down, word for word. Bit by bit, the picture came together. A whole web of lies. And every thread led back to Victor Hale. Ray felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. At night, Mia and Noah would climb into his lap while he read the papers by lamplight. Mia would trace the letters with her finger, pretending to read. Noah would fall asleep against his chest. "Are we going to win, Uncle Ray?" Mia asked one night, her voice soft. Ray kissed the top of her head. "We're going to try our best, sweetheart. And sometimes trying your best is a kind of winning all by itself. But peace never lasts long." On the 6th day, the lawyer came up the mountain. His face was grim. He gathered the villagers in the church and set his briefcase on the table. "I have good news and bad news," he said. The room went quiet. "The evidence is strong," he said. "Very strong. It shows Hale broke the law many times over." He paused. But Hale's lawyers found something, an old clause in the county records. Because the village was left empty during the storm, even for a few days, Hale is claiming the land was abandoned. Under an old law, that gives him a legal claim. A judge could side with him. A gasp went through the crowd, then whispers, then something worse. A man near the back stood up. He was one of the villagers who had never trusted Ray. He pointed a thick finger. "And whose idea was it to stay?" he said. "Him, the biker. He kept us here. He stirred up trouble with Hale. Maybe if he'd never showed up, we'd have taken the money and been safe by now." "That's not fair," Evelyn said sharply. "Isn't it?" the man shot back. "A criminal, raising 2 little kids? What kind of picture does that paint for the judge? You think Hale won't use that? A dangerous biker living with orphans in a village he refused to leave?" The room fell silent. Nobody spoke up, but nobody argued either. Ray stood by the door. He heard every word, and each one landed like a stone in his chest. He said nothing. He just looked down at his boots. That night, when the house was dark and the twins were asleep, Ray sat on the edge of Mia's little bed. He watched her breathe. He watched Noah's small hand curl around his blanket. Then he stood, quiet as a shadow. He pulled on his leather jacket. He picked up his keys, and he walked out into the cold night toward his motorcycle, alone. The morning came gray and cold. Fog hung low over the village, thick as smoke. The sun had not yet climbed over the mountains, and the world was quiet in that special way it only gets before dawn. Ray stood beside his motorcycle in the dirt yard. His breath came out in little white clouds. He pulled a rag from his pocket and wiped down the seat, though it did not need wiping. His hands just needed something to do. He checked the tires. He checked the oil. He tightened a bolt that was already tight. Anything to keep from thinking. But the thoughts came anyway. They always did. The man's words from the church kept ringing in his ears. A criminal, raising 2 little kids. A dangerous biker living with orphans. What kind of picture does that paint for the judge? Ray had heard those kinds of words his whole life. He had learned to let them roll off his back like rain off leather. But this was different. This time the words did not just hurt him. They could hurt Mia and Noah. They could cost the whole village their homes. He swung his leg over the bike and sat there for a long moment. His hands rested on the handlebars. He did not start the engine. Not yet. He looked back at the little house. The windows were dark. Inside, 2 children were sleeping. Safe, warm, believing for the first time in weeks that someone would be there when they woke up. Ray closed his eyes. Maybe this was the kindest thing he could do. Slip away quiet. Let the villagers fight their fight without a biker's shadow hanging over them, without a face like his in the courtroom. Thomas was here now. The children had their grandfather. They did not need him. Not really. That was what he told himself. He told himself that leaving was love. He told himself the twins would be better off. That someone cleaner, someone the world trusted, would look after them. He told himself a lot of things. But somewhere down deep, in a place he did not like to look, A small voice whispered the truth. The truth was that leaving was easier than staying. Leaving meant he would never have to see the disappointment on their faces. Leaving meant he could go back to being alone, where nobody expected anything of him, where nobody could be let down. He had been running his whole life. It was the only thing he was truly good at. Ray reached for the key. His fingers found it. He turned it halfway. Then he stopped. He looked down at the small drawing tucked into his jacket pocket. He did not remember putting it there. He must have grabbed it in the night. It was Mia's picture. 4 stick figures standing in a row. Him, tall and dark. Thomas, with a cane, and 2 little ones holding hands. Above them, in shaky crayon letters, she had written 2 words. Our family. Ray's throat tightened. His eyes stung. He shoved the drawing back into his pocket and gripped the handlebars hard. Just go, he told himself. Go now, before they wake. He turned the key the rest of the way. The engine coughed once, then rumbled to life. The sound broke the morning quiet like thunder. He winced. He should have pushed the bike down the road first. Too late now. He put his hand on the throttle. And then he heard it. A small voice, behind him, soft and thin as the morning fog. Uncle Ray? His whole body went stiff. He turned his head slowly. Mia stood on the porch in her nightgown. Her feet were bare on the cold wood. Her hair stuck up on one side from sleep. She held her little blanket in one fist, dragging it behind her. Her eyes were wide and scared, the way they had been that first day in the closet. She looked at the bike. She looked at his jacket. She looked at the keys in his hand. And she understood. Even at 4 years old, she understood. Her chin began to tremble. Are you leaving us too? She asked. The words hit him harder than any fist ever had. They were the same words she had carried since the day her family disappeared. The same fear. The same wound. And now he was the one causing it. The engine died under his hand. Ray killed it before he even knew what he was doing. The rumble faded, and the morning went quiet again. He sat there frozen, one boot on the dirt, staring at the little girl on the porch. No, he said. His voice came out rough. No, Mia, I'm not leaving. But the lie tasted bitter, because he had been. He climbed off the bike. He knelt in the cold dirt so he was down at her level. She dragged her blanket over and stood in front of him, close enough that he could see the sleep still crusted in the corner of her eye. I was just checking the bike, he said. That's all. She did not believe him. He could see it. But she was too tired and too scared to argue. She just leaned forward and put her small arms around his neck. Her blanket brushed his cheek. She smelled like sleep and crayons, and the soap Evelyn had brought over. Don't go, she whispered. Ray held her. He did not trust himself to speak. Then Thomas appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane, watching with those quiet eyes that saw too much. He did not say anything. He just gave Ray a small nod and gently took Mia's hand. Come on, little bird, Thomas said softly. Let's get you back to bed. Uncle Ray's got things to do. Mia looked back at Ray as her grandfather led her inside. Ray forced a smile he did not feel. He waited until the door closed. Then he got on the bike, and this time he rode. The road climbed up into the mountains. The fog swallowed him whole. Cold air bit through his jacket, and the trees stood tall and dark on either side, dripping with last night's rain. Ray leaned into the curves without thinking. His body knew this. Riding was the one thing that had never let him down. He rode for a long time. He did not know where he was going. He just needed to move, to feel the wind, to let the noise of the engine drown out the noise in his head. But it did not work. He thought about being a boy, about the foster homes that came and went, about the front doors that closed behind him, one after another, until he stopped bothering to learn people's names. He remembered lying awake at night, listening to strangers talk about him in the next room. He's trouble. He's got a bad look about him. We can't keep him. He had learned young that nobody stayed. So he learned to leave first. Leaving first meant nobody could throw him out. Leaving first meant it was his choice, not theirs. He had spent 30 years perfecting it. The mountains rolled past, gray and endless. Ray pulled over at a lookout point where the whole valley spread out below him, hidden under a blanket of cloud. He shut off the engine and sat there in the silence. He was free now. No courtroom, no angry man from the church, no little kids depending on a man like him. Free. So why did his chest feel so heavy? Why did the emptiness feel worse than it ever had before? He stayed there as the sun tried and failed to burn through the clouds. He stayed as the afternoon came and went. He bought a cold sandwich at a gas station and did not taste it. He rode some more, following roads that led nowhere, until the light began to fail and the shadows grew long. By evening he found a motel at the edge of nowhere. A flickering sign. A cracked parking lot. He paid cash and got a room that smelled like old smoke. He sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp turned low. He took off his jacket to hang it on the chair, and the drawing fell out. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up on the dirty carpet. 4 stick figures, a tall, dark one, an old one with a cane, 2 little ones holding hands. Our family. Ray bent down slowly and picked it up. He held it in both hands. His thumbs traced the shaky crayon letters. And something inside him broke open. He had told himself he was protecting them. He had told himself leaving was love. But that was another lie, maybe the biggest one of all. He was not protecting anybody. He was running, same as always. Running before he could be left. Running from the one thing he had wanted his whole life and never dared to believe he could have. A family. Ray sat back on the bed, the drawing shaking in his hands, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the tough old biker let himself cry. Ray woke to the sound of engines. Not one engine. Many. A low rumble that grew louder, rolling up the empty road toward the motel like distant thunder. He sat up on the edge of the bed, still in his boots, the drawing crumpled in his fist where he had held it all night. He went to the window and pulled back the thin curtain. His breath caught. A line of vehicles was pulling into the cracked parking lot. An old pickup truck, rust along the doors, with Thomas sitting in the passenger seat. Behind it, Evelyn's little car, and behind that, more. Villagers he had come to know, faces he had watched go from fearful to friendly over the past weeks. They climbed out into the gray morning, breath fogging in the cold, and looked toward his door. Ray did not know how they had found him. He had told no one where he was going. He had not known himself. He opened the door slowly and stepped out into the chill. Thomas came forward first, leaning heavy on his cane, moving careful across the broken pavement. His old eyes found Ray's face and held them there. He did not look angry. He did not look disappointed. He just looked tired and kind, and something else Ray could not name. "You're a hard man to track down," Thomas said. "Took us half the night calling every motel on this side of the mountain." Ray swallowed. His throat felt tight. "You shouldn't have come." "Maybe not." Thomas stopped a few feet away. "But here we are." Ray looked past him at the others. Evelyn, her hands folded in front of her coat. Jack, arms crossed, giving him a look that said plenty without a single word. A dozen villagers standing quiet in the cold, people who had once crossed the street to avoid him. "I'm no good for those kids," Ray said, the words scraped out of him. "You saw what happened. They blamed me, my past, my reputation. I'm nothing but trouble for them. Mia and Noah, they deserve better than a man like me." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "You know what Mia asked me this morning?" he said. "She asked when Uncle Ray was coming home. Not if... when." He let that sit. "Noah wouldn't eat his breakfast, just kept staring at the door." Ray closed his eyes. "Those children don't need a perfect man," Thomas went on, his voice gentle but firm. "Lord knows there's no such thing anyway. They don't care about your past. They don't care what people whisper. They've had enough of people who leave, Ray. Their whole lives, the grown-ups who promised to stay didn't." He took a step closer. "What they need is somebody who stays. That's all. That's everything." Ray opened his hand. The drawing was there, crumpled and soft from being held all night. 4 stick figures. Our family. "I ran," Ray said. His voice broke on it. "I told myself I was protecting them, but I was just running. Same as always, because I was scared." "I know," Thomas said. "I've known you a long time, old friend. I know exactly what you were doing." He reached out and put a weathered hand on Ray's shoulder. "But you're standing here talking to me instead of halfway to nowhere, so maybe you're done running." Evelyn stepped forward then. She was smiling, her eyes wet. "We were wrong about you, Ray Carter," she said. "This whole town was wrong. We judged you by that jacket and that bike and everything we thought we knew. But you showed us who you really are. Every single day you showed us." She reached out and touched his arm. "Come home. Those babies are waiting." Ray looked at all of them. These people who had driven half the night to find a man everyone else had given up on. Nobody had ever come after him. Not once in 45 years. Not one soul had ever chased him down to say, "Come back. We want you. You belong." Something loosened in his chest. The old wall, the one he had built brick by brick since he was a scared little boy, finally cracked and fell. He looked down at the drawing. Then he looked at Thomas. "Okay," Ray said quietly. "Let's go home." The ride back down the mountain felt different. Ray led the line of vehicles on his motorcycle, the cold wind biting at his face, but for the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not feel alone on the road. Behind him rolled the truck, the little car, the whole tired caravan of people who had come to bring him home. The rising sun spilled gold across the ridges. He gripped the handlebars and let himself believe, just a little, that he was worth chasing after. The village came into view as they rounded the last bend. Smoke curled from chimneys. And there, standing on the porch of the little house he had rebuilt with his own 2 hands, were 2 small figures. Mia saw him first. She jumped down the steps and ran, her small legs pumping, her braids bouncing. Noah was right behind her. Ray killed the engine and swung off the bike, and then he was on his knees in the dirt, arms wide, and both children slammed into him at once. "You came back," Mia whispered into his shoulder. "You came back." "I'm sorry," Ray said, his voice thick. He held them tight, one in each arm, breathing in the smell of their hair. "I'm not going anywhere, I promise. I mean it this time." Noah pulled back just enough to look at his face. "For real?" "For real, buddy." Ray brushed the boy's cheek with his thumb. "For keeps." He did not have long to sit in it. Thomas came up beside them, leaning on his cane, and his voice was low and serious. "Ray, he's coming today. Hale filed the final papers. There's a county meeting this afternoon at the old hall. If we don't stop it there, he takes everything." Ray stood, lifting Noah onto his hip. His jaw tightened. "Then we stop it there." The old town hall had not seen a crowd like this in years. Every villager crammed into the wooden benches. County officials sat behind a long table at the front, papers stacked before them. And there, in a sharp gray suit that cost more than most of the folks in that room made in a year, stood Victor Hale. He looked calm, confident. He wore the smile of a man who had already won. "These properties," Hale said smoothly to the officials, "have been abandoned, unsafe, uninhabited. I am simply offering to develop land that these people fled from. I'm doing this county a favor." A few of the officials nodded along. Then Thomas stood up. He walked slowly to the front, his cane tapping against the old floorboards. In his hands he held a thick folder. "They didn't flee," Thomas said, his voice ringing clear. "They were driven out, on purpose." He turned to the officials. "This man paid people to spread word that our village was dangerous. He cut off our water line. He blocked the road repairs, all so he could buy our homes for pennies." Hale's smile flickered. "That's an outrageous lie." "Is it?" Thomas laid the folder on the table. "These are copies of his own emails, bank records, payments to the men who tampered with our wells." He nodded toward the back of the room. "And we have the men themselves, willing to testify." Two nervous workers stood up in the back. The whole room turned. Ray watched Hale's face change. The confidence cracked. His eyes darted across the crowd, searching for a way out. The lead official, a stern woman with silver glasses, opened the folder. Her expression darkened as she read. She passed pages to the man beside her. He read them too, and his jaw went hard. "Mr. Hale," the woman said slowly, "these documents suggest deliberate fraud, sabotage of public utilities, coercion." She looked up. "If these check out, and I have every reason to think they will, this deal is dead. And you'll be answering to a great deal more than this county board." "You can't prove any of this," Hale snapped, but his voice had lost its polish. "We already did," Evelyn said, standing. "We just did, right here in front of everyone." The official slid the papers into her own folder and closed it with a sharp snap. "This meeting is suspended," she announced, "pending a full investigation into Mr. Hale's conduct. As of now, all sale proceedings are frozen." A murmur rose through the crowd, then swelled into something bigger. Hale stood frozen, his empire crumbling around him in real time. The days that followed felt like waking up from a long, dark dream. One by one, the families came home for good. Trucks loaded with boxes rumbled up the mountain road. Old doors swung open again. Curtains that had hung still and dusty for weeks were pulled back to let the sunlight pour in. Children who had been gone too long ran through the yards, chasing each other, their laughter bouncing off the hills. The village came alive. Ray was in the middle of all of it. He had never been much for standing around, so he grabbed a hammer and got to work. There was plenty to do. Roofs needed patching. Fences leaned crooked from the storm. The well that Hale's men had wrecked had to be dug out and made clean again. Ray moved from house to house, sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, doing what he did best, fixing things. Jack and a handful of the other bikers stayed on to help. They rode in with tools strapped to their bikes and toolboxes lashed to the backs of their trucks. At first, some of the older villagers still watched them warily. Big men in leather, tattoos up their arms, boots heavy on the porch steps. But it did not take long. Jack spent a whole afternoon fixing Evelyn's back door, then stayed for supper and told stories that had her laughing until she wiped her eyes. Another biker carried lumber up the hill for a family with a newborn baby. Little by little, the fear melted away. It always does, when people finally look past the outside and see the heart underneath. Mia and Noah followed Ray everywhere. Noah wanted to learn how everything worked. He held Ray's tools and asked question after question. "What's this one do? Why does it turn that way? Can I try?" Ray let him hold the wrench. Let him tighten a bolt, slow and careful, his little tongue poking out in concentration. "You've got good hands, buddy," Ray said. "Careful hands, that's the trick." Noah beamed like he had been handed the whole world. Mia liked to plant things. She found seed packets in the old general store and dug little holes in the dirt around the porch of the house Ray had rebuilt. He knelt beside her in the dirt, patting soil over the seeds with his big, rough hands. "Will they really grow?" she asked. "They will," Ray said. "You just gotta give them time, and you gotta not give up on them." Mia looked at him a long moment. Then she smiled. "Like you didn't give up on us." Ray's throat went tight. He nodded and looked down at the dirt. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Like that." Thomas grew stronger every day. He took his old place at the center of things, guiding the rebuilding, settling small arguments, telling the young ones stories about how the village used to be. But every evening, he made a point to sit on the porch with Ray, the two old friends watching the sun sink behind the ridges. "I always knew you had it in you," Thomas said one night. "Even back when we were young and stupid, you were always the one who stayed." Ray did not answer right away. He just let the words settle into him, warm as the fading light. Then, on a bright Saturday when the work had finally slowed, the village threw a celebration. They set up long tables in the open square. Somebody strung lights between the trees. There was food everywhere, plates of it, more than anyone could eat. A fiddle played. Children ran between the tables with sticky fingers and bright eyes. And when the sun began to set, Evelyn climbed up on the little wooden platform they had built and raised her hands for quiet. The whole village hushed. "Not so long ago," Evelyn began, her voice trembling with feeling, "a stranger rode into our village, and I will be honest, I was afraid of him." A few people chuckled. Ray shifted where he stood at the back, suddenly wishing he could disappear. "I judged him by his jacket," Evelyn went on. "By his bike, by the look of him. Shame on me for that, because that man turned out to have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known." She looked right at him. "Ray Carter, come up here." Ray did not move at first. His boots felt stuck to the ground. Every eye in the square had turned toward him, and for a man who had spent his whole life being stared at for the wrong reasons, this felt different. Stranger. Kinder. Mia grabbed his hand and tugged. "Go on, Uncle Ray," she whispered. So he went. He walked up through the crowd, and folks reached out to pat his shoulder as he passed. He climbed the little wooden platform and stood beside Evelyn, feeling too big for it, not knowing what to do with his hands. "Go on," Evelyn said gently. "Say something." Ray looked out at all those faces, faces that had once looked at him with fear. Now they looked at him with something he had no name for. "I'm not much for talking," he said. The crowd laughed softly. "I came up this mountain looking for one old friend. Just one." He glanced at Thomas, who lifted his hand. "I figured I'd find him, and then I'd move on, like always." He swallowed hard. "Instead, I found a couple of kids in a closet. And I found all of you." His voice cracked, just a little. "I spent 45 years thinking I didn't belong anywhere. Turns out I just hadn't found the right place yet." He could not say anything more after that. He did not need to. The whole square broke into cheers, and Mia and Noah barreled into his legs, and Ray knelt down and wrapped them both up in his arms. The weeks that followed rolled by soft and easy. Ray fixed his last few roofs. He helped dig the well deeper so it would never run dry again. He and Jack got the old general store open, and folks started leaving little gifts on Ray's porch. A pie, a jar of honey, a hand-knit scarf from Evelyn for when the cold came. He slept better than he had in years. And then came the day everyone had been counting down to. Mia and Noah's birthday. They were turning 5. The whole village pitched in. Thomas hung a banner across the porch of the rebuilt house. Evelyn baked a cake so tall it wobbled when you carried it. The other children came in their nicest clothes, holding presents wrapped in newspaper and tied with string. Ray had been up since dawn. He had built them something, a wooden swing hung from the sturdy old oak in the yard. He had sanded every board smooth so no splinter could ever catch their small hands. He had painted their names on the side in careful letters. Mia. Noah. When the twins saw it, they screamed with joy and raced across the yard. "Push us! Push us, Uncle Ray!" So he did. He pushed them until they laughed so hard they could barely breathe, their little legs kicking at the sky, the whole village clapping along. Later, when the cake was cut and the candles blown out, Ray sat back in an old chair on the porch and just watched. He watched Mia show off her new drawing to Evelyn. He watched Noah chase the other boys with a toy truck Jack had given him. He watched Thomas sitting in the shade, smiling that quiet, knowing smile. He watched the bikers and the villagers standing shoulder to shoulder, sharing plates of cake, telling stories, all of them tangled up together like they had known each other their whole lives. The lights swayed in the trees. The fiddle started up again. Somewhere a dog barked and a baby laughed, and Ray felt it settle over him, warm and sure. He was not a stranger here. He was not the man everyone crossed the street to avoid. He was not the leather jacket or the tattoos or the reputation that had followed him for so many years. Not here. Here, he was Uncle Ray, the man who fixed the roofs, the man who built the swing, the man who stayed. Mia climbed up into his lap, sticky with frosting, and rested her head against his chest. "This is the best birthday ever," she murmured. Ray wrapped his arm around her and looked out at the village. His village. For the first time in his whole life, he knew exactly where he belonged. The seasons turned, and the little house on the hill became the heart of everything. Folks just started showing up. That was how it happened. First it was Evelyn, dropping by with a basket of biscuits on a Sunday morning. Then it was Jack, tinkering in the yard with a busted engine, laughter drifting through the open windows. Then it was half the village, it seemed, filling the rooms with warmth and noise and the smell of coffee always brewing on the stove. Ray had never planned it that way. But the house that had once held 2 frightened children in a dusty closet now held something else entirely. It held laughter. It held music on the weekends when the fiddle came out. It held long dinners that stretched past dark, plates passed hand to hand around a table Ray had built himself, sanded smooth and long enough to seat anyone who wandered in. The children grew like weeds. Noah followed Ray everywhere now. The boy who once hid behind his sister had found his voice, and he used it to ask 1,000 questions a day. Why does the engine make that sound? How do you know which wrench to use? What makes the sparks come out? Ray answered everyone. On slow afternoons, he would prop the boy up on an overturned crate in the shed, hand him a wrench that was too big for his small hands, and let him try. Noah's tongue would stick out the corner of his mouth as he worked, so serious, so proud. And when he finally got a bolt loose all by himself, he would look up at Ray with eyes shining like he had just moved a mountain. "You're a natural, kid," Ray would say, and Noah would grin so wide it near split his face. Mia was different. Mia liked things that grew. Together they dug up a patch of dirt along the front of the house, right beneath the windows. Ray's hands, big and rough and scarred, working alongside her small ones in the soft brown earth. They planted flowers, marigolds and daisies, and a row of sunflowers that Mia swore would grow taller than Ray one day. "Taller than me?" Ray asked, raising an eyebrow. "Now that I gotta see." "You'll see," Mia said, patting the dirt down with great importance. "I'll make them grow. I'm real good at it." And she was. By midsummer, those flowers had burst into a riot of color, and Mia would run out every morning to check on them, calling each one by name. When the sunflowers finally stretched up past the windowsill, she dragged Ray outside to measure. "Almost," she declared, standing on her toes. "Almost as tall as you, Uncle Ray." "Give 'em time," Ray said, and he meant it about more than the flowers. The swing under the oak got used near every day. The names painted on the side had faded a little from all the sun and rain, so Ray touched them up one afternoon. Mia, Noah. Careful letters, steady hand. He would not let those names fade. Not ever. One evening, after the children had worn themselves out and gone to sleep, Ray sat on the porch steps watching the last of the light drain out of the sky. Thomas eased down beside him, slow and careful the way older folks do. And for a while, the two men just sat in the quiet, listening to the crickets start up their song. "You know," Thomas said finally, "I've been meaning to tell you something." Ray looked over. "When I couldn't get back to them," Thomas said, his voice low and rough. "When I was stuck out there after the crash, all I could think about was those two babies, alone, believing nobody was coming." He shook his head. "It near killed me, Ray. Not the injuries. That." Ray said nothing. He just listened, the way he had learned to. "You saved their lives. I'll never forget that." Thomas turned to look at him, his old eyes wet and steady. "But that ain't the biggest thing you did." "No?" "No." Thomas reached over and gripped Ray's shoulder, firm and sure. "You taught those children that somebody would stay. That's the gift, Ray. Not that you saved them once, but that you never left." Ray's throat went tight. He looked out at the dark hills and blinked hard, and for once he did not try to hide it. "I didn't know how to do any of it," he said quietly. "Braiding hair, cooking, reading those little books. I burned near everything I touched that first month." Thomas chuckled, low and warm. "They didn't care about that." "No," Ray agreed. "They didn't." The old man patted his shoulder once more and left his hand there a long moment before he pulled it back. The crickets sang on, and Ray sat with the truth of it settling deep into his bones, heavier and gentler than anything he had ever carried. One year to the day after the storm, the whole village came together. They set up tables in the open field at the center of town, long ones lined end to end, draped with cloths that fluttered in the breeze. Someone strung lights between the trees. Someone else hauled out grills, and soon the air was thick with the smell of good food and wood smoke. Children ran wild through the grass. The fiddle played. Folks laughed the kind of easy laugh that only comes from people who have been through something hard together and made it out the other side. There was a banner, too, hand-painted by the school children, stretched between two poles. It read, in big, wobbly letters, "Thank you to the ones who stayed." Ray stood at the edge of it all, thumbs hooked in his belt, watching. Old habits. He had spent his whole life at the edges of things, on the outside looking in. It felt strange to be here now, in the middle of a place that had opened its arms to him. Evelyn found him first. She marched right up, took his big hand in both of her small, wrinkled ones, and squeezed. When you first rode into this village, she said, I'll be honest with you. I was scared half to death. Ray gave a short laugh. I know it. I judged you, she said. By your jacket. By that beard. By everything I thought a man like you was supposed to be. Her eyes shone. I was a foolish old woman, and I'm sorry for it. You've got nothing to be sorry for, Evelyn. I do. She patted his hand. But I aim to make up for it. Now come on, there's pie. The evening rolled on, golden and warm. Jack clapped him on the back and handed him a cold drink. The other bikers who had come to help, the ones folks had once eyed with such fear, now sat elbow to elbow with the villagers, telling stories and passing plates. Somewhere along the way, the line between them had just disappeared. Then Thomas stood, tapping a fork against a glass until the crowd went quiet. He spoke about the storm, about the fear, about losing near everything and finding, in the ashes of it, something worth more than anything they had lost. And then he turned and looked right at Ray. There's a man here, Thomas said, who came looking for one lost friend. And instead he found a whole family that needed him. He didn't have to stay. Lord knows nobody would have blamed him for riding off. But he stayed. His voice cracked. He stayed. The whole field erupted. Folks stood. They clapped. They cheered until Ray's ears rang, and he stood there in the middle of them, not knowing what to do with his hands, his eyes burning, his heart too full for words. Later, when the noise had softened, and the lights glowed like fireflies in the dark, Mia came and climbed up into his lap. She smelled like grass and sunshine. She tucked her head under his chin the way she always did. Uncle Ray? Yeah, sweetheart? She was quiet a moment, thinking hard the way she did. Then she looked up at him with those big, serious eyes. You didn't find us, Uncle Ray, she said. We found you. And there it was. Ray held her close and let her words wash over him, and in that moment he finally understood the whole of it. All his life he had been the man people crossed the street to avoid, the feared one, the dangerous one, the monster in the leather jacket. But not here, not to them. Here, he was the man who stayed when everyone else was gone. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.